such a big question. Diversity of culture, diversity of thinking, diversity of ethnicity, diversity of gender.
Okay, welcome back everyone. You're joining us for the Cyber Edition mini mentoring series, and we're at episode 3 now, and we're very delighted to have CEO of AustCyber Michelle Price joining us. Thanks for joining us, Michelle.
It is so good to be with you, Tim. Thanks so much for having me.
No, it's really fantastic to have you, and as AustCyber with Paula Oliver out of South Australia has been leading the charge down there with the program, so it's fantastic to reach back into the organisation and get some of your views and perspectives as the leader of the organisation. So thanks very much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you. What we might do is I'm just going to start out with a little bit of a pre-question before we jump in, and just find out how you are personally, how you've been going throughout COVID and the pandemic and the challenges, and just check in with you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's wonderful. Look, I think better than so many people around the world, you know, it's all about context and it's always relative. Australia's sort of first wave is what the medicos are referring to as the current situation, which is, you know, for future listeners of this episode, you know, with the current wave of increased cases in both Victoria but now also New South Wales, you know, the way in which that's community to community transmission sees it being really the first technical wave for Australia. We're still so much better off than so many other countries around the world, but it's obviously pretty taxing, you know, the kind of lockdown and having to deal with all of the sort of ins and outs of that. And, you know, I am a mum, so I was doing the school from home as well as the work from home and running AustCyber, but also making sure that our ecosystem of companies were being as well looked after as they possibly could be. I think one of the things that, you know, in a first world context that I can say with a bit of pride now, I guess, is that I'm coming to you without any makeup on. I haven't really done my hair as what I normally would. I'm not okay with that, but it's a reflection of the times, I think, when we're trying to juggle so many things. And so the bags under the eyes are starting to get pretty reflective of how much blue light we're being exposed to. But I am faring pretty well. Thank you so much.
Well, that's great to hear, and I think as part of this, we need to have a badging system for super mums and super dads who've been, you know, homeschooling while running organisations and all that kind of stuff, because that's got to be exceptionally challenging for everyone, from someone just needing to go into the office through to someone leading an organisation. I mean, that's balance of work and home and managing people is just a big challenge for everyone at the moment. So, you know, we should recognise that in some way. Maybe we can do that at the awards or one of those things as it goes on.
Indeed, thank you.
So what we'll do now is we'll jump into the quick lightning round so that our viewers can learn a little bit more about you. So question 1 from the lightning round is, we've got lockdown, social distancing, travel restrictions at the moment. What's the thing you missed most about pre-pandemic?
Do you know, actually, it's the physical contact. Like, I think that is for everyone. But I, as people that know me, I travel a lot for the role of AustCyber and leading the organisation, but also representing Australia's sovereign capability out into the world. And so I didn't think I'd ever miss a plane so much, you know, but more than that, actually missing spending that time in person with people. It's a big part of the job, and it's a big privilege to spend time with people around the world, and I really genuinely miss it.
Yeah, I think that's a really big thing. I mean, I personally started out from you know, going to shake someone's hand and then stopping and, you know, doing those kind of things that are ingrained into us. But that leads in really well to our next question, where you did used to travel a lot pre-lockdown. I think half of your Twitter account has to be you at an airport or you at an event in a different state or country somewhere. Have you found yourself with more time without the daily travel to airports, or are you experiencing Zoom fatigue with never-ending video conferences and those types of things?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter. And, it's been fascinating that I actually feel like I'm the busiest I've ever been. And I wish that I could say that I had forced myself a bit of discipline in all of that I was able to take more breaks through the day and, exercise in the morning and all of that kind of stuff. It has not been the case for me at all. In fact, I think not being able to travel has meant that all of those gaps that otherwise would have been having a moment to myself to gather my thoughts or to be able to kind of appreciate the conversations that I've had in an airport lounge, for example, just having that quiet time in my own zone has been taken up by other time zones. So using that time to make sure that we've still got those connections deepening, in other parts of the world. So having calls first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And then, of course, the busyness of making sure that, we've got things ticking along through the day as well. And, at AustCyber, we're constantly looking at how we can do better. So taking some of the time when everyone was looking inwards in that sort of middle period of March through April and early May to really sort of cross-examine, if you like, what AustCyber had been doing and where we needed to go to next, because we don't know what new normal is yet.
Yeah, and it's got to be particularly challenging for people that have either been laid off or are looking at different sectors or leaving school or looking to transition. So that we can learn a little bit more about your own pathway, could you tell us what was your very first job that you ever had, as well as a little bit about how does someone with a background in food safety find themselves previously travel hopping around the globe with a cyber kangaroo mascot, leading the charge for cybersecurity?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Yeah, there's she is. She's a she. Yeah, that's right. She's got a little Joey in her pouch as well. So, I think that I'd had my very first job actually helping my grandmother rent out videos in rural New South Wales at the age of about 7, and I got paid in caramel slice. And so on my mum's side of the family, we come from a sheep and wheat farming community in central western New South Wales, so that's where that kind of sense of community started to come from for me. The real importance of having trusted relationships as part of how you look after people and help that community to keep moving forward through adversity, and of course witnessed many severe droughts through all of that. But my first paying job was actually with KFC. I worked at KFC when I was in high school, and I learned a lot there actually around the process of management, but also making sure that protocols and processes are stuck to, so that you get that consistency. Whether you think that's good quality or not, I'll leave that to the listeners to decide whether or not KFC consistently dishes up good quality, but learned a lot about teamwork in that environment as well. And then I think my first grown-up got a job post-university was actually not post-university. It was while I was studying that I started my first grown-up job in the sense of a broader workplace, and that was actually with my running companies with my parents in food safety.
Wow, quite a journey to be where you are today. And you spoke a little bit then about teamwork as part of it, and that being kind of in your bones from growing up in country New South Wales, and that sense of community. I'm curious, as the CEO of AustCyber, you're responsible for a geographically dispersed team, as well as a wide range of stakeholders. Could you talk a little bit about how difficult, or perhaps not, you've found it to not just maintain culture during the current challenges, but how to continue growth as well?
Yes, that's really important too, and of course I didn't answer the second part of your question there, which is part of how I did come to be in the position that I'm in. I studied both economics and law at university in one degree, but then in another degree I did graphic design, and so the reason why that's important context is that I had a great love of entrepreneurial ability and a passion for small business out of my first grown-up job working with mum and dad in food safety, and that was around food safety training and food safety auditing. So having a really deep appreciation of the role of working together for a common outcome. And in the case of, food safety, it's saving people's lives that are entirely preventable through human activity in a supply chain. And so then fast forwarding to when I came to government, that was all focused on risk management and strategy. And it turns out that as a result of my kind of on-the-job learning through, sort of the different roles that I've had, but also in terms of my academic training, if you like, it turned out I'm reasonably good at strategy and policy, but being able to also do that in an applied way. And so when I was offered the opportunity to come to AustCyber, and of course, some would know that I designed AustCyber when I was in government, so having that industry experience, then going into government and then coming back out into industry again, it's given a really rounded view on how important it is to have the infrastructure that incentivises growth. And so, working in partnership with people is so important in that, and collaboration, because of course we're all fiercely defending of our own patch in Australia. Resources are short often in Australia, and that, we often have to fight with each other to get that last dollar, wherever that dollar might be coming from. But at the same time, we've got such a passion to be able to see a problem get solved in Australia, and that's where that spirit of entrepreneurship comes from. So to be able to take all of those different experiences and focus that on the great opportunity that Australia has around the growth of a sovereign cybersecurity industry, for me, it's actually quite straightforward. It's identifying who are the key partners that we can do this with, because we don't want to do it alone. This is not just for us, this is actually for the country. So that means that partnership has to be part of it. And when you can show a common goal, and you can also, as part of that goal, sort of start to outline what success could look like and how many people can share in that success, it becomes quite straightforward as to how you get from kind of zero to hero. It does take time, and I am impatient for some things, but I'm also very patient for others. If I have to wait an extra 5 minutes to make sure that the right people are in the room, I'll always do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's changing or the whole landscape around, cyber from an awareness, from a capacity, from a capability perspective is like pushing on the ocean in a lot of ways. So, it does take time. I'm wondering if we could just go a little further into that point. So that's, a great perspective on the AustCyber ecosystem and friends of AustCyber, and we'll leave a link in the description below with how you can connect with AustCyber as a friend of AustCyber and join their mailing list there. But I'm wondering, Michelle, could you talk a little bit about your own team? And without being able to travel everywhere, and if you're there for an event, you can catch a AustCyber node manager and those types of things. Now that it's pretty much virtual as part of it, and you have AustCyber nodes, and I think one of them popped up recently was it Sunshine Coast, and you've got another couple coming online. Is it Bathurst or somewhere like that as well? So I'm just wondering how as the leader of the organization are you keeping up within your own team?
It's a great question. I'm so proud actually of how we do this at AustCyber. So first and foremost, I famously say that attitude is 9/10 of the law. I recruit for attitude. A lot of the skills around the endeavour of growing an industry can actually be taught. But if you don't have the right attitude, if you're not open to new ideas and creativity, and you've got that kind of spark of curiosity to try and do things in a better way, then it can become too hard for some people to kind of jump into a mission that is very defined, but the ways and means of achieving that mission can, ebb and flow and duck and weave every single day. So it starts from the recruitment process and finding amazing people that have some great skills and expertise to bring to the table, but also have a great attitude. And so making sure that everyone's got that great attitude, then of course it instantly dovetails into a passion for the mission. And that's really, really important to me, is that everyone within the team has that passion for what AustCyber is trying to get done. We're doing it off the smell of an oily rag, frankly. I think it would surprise a lot of people who know the achievements that we've been able to kick goals with over the past 3.5 years. We have an operating budget of $3.5 million a year, and most of that is actually spent on people. So the actual budget that we have each year to deliver the programs that we deliver nationally, including our nodes, is only about $1 million. So it's not very much money to be building an industry, and certainly, of course, some of our international colleagues absolutely gasp at how much we're doing off the back of that. It comes because of partnerships. And so our nodes become that physical embodiment of how we're doing that growth curve, but also making sure that from the get-go, there's that sense of, build local, deliver global, which is why it's so important to me that we demonstrate in a physical way that you can have great cyber companies being built out of capital cities as much as you can from regional Australia as well. So such a proud day for AustCyber's history too, when we announced and launched, virtually launched, our first two regional nodes, which are in Queensland, in Maroochydore at the Sunshine Coast and in Townsville. And there's going to be so many more to come, off the back of seeing Queensland announce their two regional nodes. We've had all sorts of inquiries from across Australia, with local councils seeing the opportunity to be able to have jobs creation within their jurisdictions because of the fact that cyber can bring that uplift. You've got that double benefit of having jobs creation because people need cyber services and products, but also those cyber products and services are making those communities a greater place to do business. And so, the team is such an important part of that. And as I say to the team, maybe too often, maybe I start to sound like a bit of a proud mum, but they've all been very specifically chosen for what they do. And that, when I look at our node managers, for example, Paula in South Australia, her personality is so adapted to, because she is of Adelaide, that people absolutely see her as a connected local. She's a local, she is of them, but she is so hyper connected into the national picture and the international picture through how we map that kind of connectivity between our nodes and AustCyber Central. But more than that, the secret to the success actually is that every single Friday at AustCyber, we call it Friday, every single Friday of every single week is spent looking inward, where we are constantly checking in with each other. We're constantly evaluating whether or not what we're doing is on point, is having impact, but equally we're celebrating the wins. And, it was put to me a couple of years ago that an AustCyber week is like everybody else's quarter. We get through so much every week, and it's because of that passion and that drive that the team brings to bear, and us being able to reflect on that and improve on that every single week.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic. And I mean, working with not much. You're not AustCyber isn't an association as part of it, but you do a lot similar to the associations and the local councils and those types of things. But you're fostering growth at a local level, but then that's translating into national policy, national ideas, national engagement that then echoes internationally. As well. So, more power to your arm, I think. We might jump into the main questions. So the first main question that we've got is on a program itself. So AustCyber's GovPitch has recently completed, I think it's its 4th annual showcase with cyber SMEs pitching directly to federal government. Could you explain a little bit about what GovPitch is, its success, and why it was created in the first place?
Absolutely. So one of the key reasons why AustCyber needed to be a national network, but also be an organisation, and so, we're a growth centre, be an organisation that is funded by government, but is separate to government. So for listeners, growth centres are actually companies that are limited by guarantee. We are companies in our own right. We have to submit a BAS every quarter, and, we operate as companies, and we do have an independent board, and government is not part of that board. Government can observe that on that board, but our board is not, it doesn't have government members on it. And so, there's a really important, I think, value that comes from being able to have that independent role. But one of the things that we identified even before AustCyber had, stood up and opened its doors on the 1st of January in 2017 was this issue around the fact that, we've got the opportunity to be a globally competitive supplier of great capability to the world, but our own governments were not buying from local. And so the reason that we were constantly given as to why that is happening is because there's not enough companies that could be around tomorrow. That sort of age-old thing about how startups will fail, and that, we can't sign great big contracts with them because they might not be here tomorrow. We really wanted to challenge that, and to channel the kind of almost, I'd say, defensiveness towards trying to challenge that into an environment that would provide a safe space for agencies to learn about what was out there and see how these capabilities were being developed, but also provide the companies with a safe environment for them to be able to do something which is actually really quite scary for new companies, and that's to pitch to the federal government. It's terrifying. It came from that combination of wanting to be able to showcase more of what's going on in our own country, but do it in a way that actually enabled both sides of the coin to grow together. And so the success of GovPitch has come from that. But I think one of the other elements of success has come from the fact that we do have people such as myself who have come out of government who can identify, again, in a safe and as de-risked a kind of way as possible, what the kinds of problem sets are that the government is facing, and being able to directly match capabilities against those problem sets without people even realising that that's in fact what we have been doing. That's what gives that sense that, to the agencies, yeah, I've got that problem. I need to solve that problem, and I'm going to solve that problem with a local capability provider, not necessarily because they're local, but because they do it better than perhaps what others could do it. So there's always a bit of fun too for the day-to-day, and it doesn't really matter if actually you're a government agency or if you're a larger commercial organisation. Participating in a pitch event is something that's a bit different to the everyday, and so GovPitch came out of that environment. And to be honest, we didn't know at the beginning how well it would go. But in the true AustCyber way, we did develop it and design it and deliver it in such a way that we were ensuring its success. And of course, it's now become one of the sort of key activities that AustCyber does, that all of the companies want to be a part of. And increasingly, actually, the agencies seek out and ask if, we've had a couple of government agencies over the past 12 months, both at the federal level as well as the state level, be able to, turn around and say, hey, could you do that just for our agency? Do we have to do it with everyone else? That's kind of a really lovely outcome. But most importantly, we are seeing the needle turn. We are seeing government agencies become more comfortable with procuring from smaller organisations, and we're also seeing those niche capabilities that we have great global competitiveness in being bought by government agencies. The first GovPitch that we ran in 2017, the first company out of that lineup to get a government contract, it took 18 months from the GovPitch through to when that contract was signed. But within that 3 months of that first contract being signed, in fact, every other, separately, coincidentally, every other company that had been as part of that lineup got deals as well. From this most recent GovPitch, which was held last week, it was on Tuesday of last week, and by the time we had gotten to Friday, 2 of the companies that were in the lineup had gotten written requests for proofs of concept. So we're seeing that window really tighten up, which is fantastic. And if that's because of the environment that we're in at the moment with the pandemic, all the better for it, because the country needs it more than ever now.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic mechanism to engage with what can be sometimes challenging for smaller organisations to have a voice into federal government outside of what might be a traditional panel or those types of things. And having AustCyber champion that, I think, is just critical to the way that federal and even state government can look at doing things going forward. We'll make sure to include a link to the GovPitch people in the description notes below. We know personally a couple of them, like Matt and the team from Pen 10 and a whole range of the others there. But for anyone interested in cyber, check out these companies to see what some fantastic startups and innovators are doing in the cyber space that are homegrown.
Indeed, it's like a little shortlist for people to have a look at and kind of taste, like a bit of a degustation menu around what we've got on offer.
Yeah, exactly. And it's some of the ones that you might not hear about more broadly, but they're doing some fantastic things in their own little ecosystem as well. And some are really starting to break out, which is really exciting. The next question, during your time, and you mentioned before that you're working in government, while you were at the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, you played a key role in delivering Australia's 2015 Cybersecurity Review and the Australian Cybersecurity Strategy. So it's 5 years later, it's 2020, we've got the next strategy around the corner. What's your view on when you're working on that 5 years ago and putting that out as that kind of, exemplar piece into changing the narrative, or even just identifying some areas of growth or risk, about where we are now? Are we ahead or behind?
Yeah, great question, because lots has happened in the world in that 5 years, of course, and I was intensely proud to have written that strategy. I guess the greatest affirmation, could be said that at not long after the strategy was released, President Obama actually said it was the best strategy that related to national security he'd ever seen. So I was like, oh my goodness, that was amazing. Wow, that's
amazing, yeah.
But, even better than that, industry welcomed it, and industry has leveraged it to be able to continue to do their great work. And it's also helped to provide a greater sense of cohesion between the states and territories and the federal government from a government point of view. And I think that we've learned more about what the public-private partnership looks like. So 5 years on, it's a little bit of like when we have these kinds of medical breakthroughs and we see an initial, sort of really big spike in the number of diagnoses that happen around something. So is that because we know more about it and there's a point of a point of reference around, a test being released or a vaccine being released? Or was there that number of cases beforehand? So could we say, for example, that if that cybersecurity strategy hadn't been released when it had been released, would we know as much about the threats landscape today as what we do? Would we be caring as much about how many attacks on our digital infrastructure are happening, and how many attacks on our identities, and how many attacks on data is going on? Well, I would suggest that it's probably somewhere down the middle. I think because of the strategy, the country knows how to have conversations about cybersecurity. And in particular, of course, in that equation, the media plays such an important role in being able to frame and characterise what the nature of the opportunity as well as the challenge is. And we know that media outlets are pretty good at going sensationalist. But I think that, before the strategy, we really didn't see very much coverage at all in Australia of any kind of incident that was going on within our own boundaries. I think we'd all recall the stuff that happened with the Target breach, because that was the first time that a CEO of an organisation lost their job because there had been a malicious compromise that cost that company a significant amount of money. And of course, there was always the Sony breach, which we now know was North Korea. These are really famous cyber incidents that happened. And at that time, those things happened when I was in government developing the strategy. And there was still that very strong sense that it's just so far away. It's not relatable to the Australian economy. This is not happening to us. We don't have to worry about that risk. We've got many other things that we need to worry about. It was around the time of when finally the sort of national bodies for workplace health and safety had agreed on the first national legislation, and everyone's like, well, we've got to worry about OH&S again, and now we've got to call it something else. And don't tell me there's this thing called cyber I've got to start thinking about. So certainly it has moved the needle on in that way. And when we go back to 2016, when Prime Minister Turnbull released the strategy, and there was so much interest in it, all of our allies around the world, not just Five Eyes, but also our like-minded colleagues, were fascinated by the fact that the strategy dealt with both the protect and defend side, which is the national security side of things, but also the opportunities for the economy to be able to grow from a strategy that positioned cybersecurity as such an underlying enabler. But even more than that it characterised the role of talent and skills in a tangible way. So I think because of that, the strategy really did move things ahead. I think in some respects, though, we have gone backwards on the sort of the protect and defend side of things. That's for a whole range of reasons. I think that, there's a lot of fatigue around how how much effort it takes to just keep pace with malicious actors. And it's hard to maintain that kind of focus because it sounds like we're talking about the same things over and over and over again, when we kind of are, but we're also kind of not. So I think the way to keep energising the conversation around cybersecurity is to as much talk about the threats and downside risks involved as it is important to talk about the upside risks and opportunity, because that is what really kind of shows a better way to people around why they do need to care about cybersecurity. So I think absolutely we've got more that we need to do. There's no two ways about that. But we're never going to be perfect in cybersecurity in the same way that we will never be perfect around the endeavour of health, around things like, workplace health and safety, anything that involves complex risk. We're never going to be perfect as humans at doing these things. What we've done with the internet and with digital technologies is make that landscape even more tricky. So cybersecurity really is here to stay. We've got to just make sure that we keep focusing on how we maintain people's attention on it and their care factor on it. So it is time for us, of course, to look at what comes next through another strategy. But it's not, I don't think it should be framed as, well, we've just kind of ticked the box on the 2016 strategy and then there's a separate amount of things that we need to do. It should be seen as an evolution on the story that we've started, because so much has changed over the past 4 years in particular around how we conceive of cyber risk and cyber opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. And I mean, whether there's specific things that are ticked off or whether it's around the narrative piece, one of the things I really admire about the work that you and the team do at AustCyber is actually on that connector piece. So it's not the cybersecurity, or 5 years ago it was probably information security, and it's a black box somewhere to do with a hacker, all that kind of thing. Whereas you've really changed the narrative, or in the process of changing and educating the narrative, so that cyber is, as you said, cyber security in itself, but it's cyber education, it's cyber affairs from a policy and awareness perspective, through to personal security and your own devices, all those types of things, which is, it just goes to show one of the things that you're always saying about cyber is across the horizontal and the vertical. So the next question we've got is, whether it's a process, culture, curriculum, event, or program, what mechanism to enable the cyber ecosystem are you most envious of from overseas and that you would like to see in Australia?
That's a great question. I think that it's one of the areas that we're going to be focusing on over the next 12 months, actually. So one of the things I'm most envious of, particularly out of places like the UK, and to some extent parts of the US, but also parts of Europe. And how often do we talk about South America when we refer to cybersecurity? It's not really a location in the world or a part of the world that people relate to cybersecurity, but they've got some really interesting things going on. And that's around this concept of a cluster. And so we might say that at the moment, our nodes are local clusters of activity. They absolutely are. But what we're working on as part of that continuous improvement, but also sustained growth around our national network, is this concept of a supercluster, where you can take a networked effect, having a network of locations that are constantly scouting for amazing talent, whether that's entrepreneurial talent, it's capability development talent, it's the capability themselves that are going to solve really complex and tricky problems, and being able to jettison them into an environment where they've got so much supercharged energy going on for them to just rocket through the world. So this is what we have seen in the successful kind of ecosystems of Silicon Valley, which is of course the most famous one. But actually the quieter achiever in that equation is actually the UK. And so you look at the way in which the UK is really, like, London is now the financial capital of the world. But when people say financial capital of the world, people are still thinking of Wall Street. Whether you're taking it in terms of the number of people employed, the number of companies in one location, the gross value add, the GDP, by whichever measure you want to take, London has the highest concentration of financial services activity in the world. And out of that comes a huge amount of innovation. And so, when I look at that sort of locational clustering of how you can wrap a whole series of expertise, capital, advice and applied learning environments, they really are starting to propel globally significant changes in the way that financial services runs itself for the world. And so, and again, most people would think that that kind of ingenuity is coming out of Wall Street. It's not. And so that's what I want for cyber. I want us to be able to have like a supercluster effect where we really can take if we give some great examples here, we've already seen some great scale come from companies like ThreatMetrics, which, used to be an Australian company and exited a couple of years ago at $1 billion valuation. We actually did have a cyber unicorn in Australia, but we didn't have an AustCyber at the time to be able to point to the fact that we had a cyber unicorn in the country, and we lost it because it was not Australian capital that went into that company. But the latest examples are companies like Casada and Secure Code Warrior, where they are really demonstrating that cyber capabilities can scale in the same kind of way, but through different means to other types of technologies. And so, of course, famously, we've now got, Airwallex and Atlassian and Canva. We are very soon going to have cyber versions of those kinds of companies where they've got that international scale and those huge valuations that are not ballooned valuations, they're genuine valuations because of the way in which those capabilities solve problems. So that's my jealousy of where I see, that huge amount of kind of focused activity and everyone pulling in the same direction to see success happen, because the spoils of that effort are not just financial. When it comes to cyber, the entire country benefits from that. The average person on the street might not yet be able to tangibly understand what that means, but very soon they will. We now know the tangible impact that Wi-Fi has had on our everyday lives, and most people now know that Wi-Fi was invented in Australia. This is the kind of stuff that we're talking about and is happening. We're positioning for that to happen with cyber.
Yeah, some cyber unicorns coming to you soon. Very exciting. I just wanted to check, are you right up against it? We've got 2 more questions to go.
No, I'm good. I've just got an internal meeting. That's good.
They'll be quick ones.
That's all right.
And so, the final question of the main questions is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received from a mentor? And do you yourself have a personal approach to mentoring?
Ooh, very good. So the best piece of advice I've ever received from a mentor is, it's kind of a tried and true, but when you come from the kind of backgrounds that people like us do, where you come out of a home environment that has, gone through the financial trials and tribulations of what the sort of 70s, 80s and 90s presented in Australia, where we didn't know how to spell venture capital, all of that kind of stuff. Back yourself. I had somebody say that to me a very long time ago, and I didn't believe it. I actually genuinely didn't believe it. I'm like, well, what is there to back? What do I have that needs backing? And it wasn't until I was involved in the development of the cybersecurity strategy for government that I really started to appreciate what that meant, because I was dealing with ministers and I was obviously supporting the Prime Minister. And through that process, I actually worked with 2 Prime Ministers. It was Prime Minister Abbott and Prime Minister Turnbull. And working across all different secretaries of departments and agency heads, and I was doing that as little old me, and people were trusting me to do that. I had to back myself, otherwise I was not going to get the job done. And so that's been now, I have a fantastic relationship, a highly, highly, highly valued relationship with the chairs of my board. I've got 2 chairs, which I love, that I've got 2 chairs. And they, in their own way, say that to me almost every time we have a conversation, to keep backing myself because I'm doing the job, And so, I think that's that's invaluable. It can be hard to realise though, because it sounds really naff and it sounds kind of simple, but when you truly believe that, because the Australian way is to not believe that, because it sounds like it's going to be arrogant and it sounds like you're going to come across as though you know better than everybody else. It's not actually the case. It's dealing with your own personal demons to be able to sort of really find your inner source of confidence. And, you know, that's now something that people reflect on, is that, gosh, you know, Michelle comes across as so confident. Well, I've had to work pretty hard at that, but I'm proud that I have. And so, you know, every day I still get the sort of, you know, flutters in my stomach when I'm going into an important conversation, but I use that to benefit. And so I think then in the second part of your question, in terms of what it is to be a mentor, you know, it's a privilege, first and foremost. And it's like any other kind of relationship where someone is relying on every word that you're saying to them. They're using it as a means to see what good looks like, not just in terms of the information and advice that you're sharing, but also how you present that information and advice. I'm really, really conscious of that when I get asked to be a mentor. And, you know, the conversations that you and I have had, Tim, about, you know, the role of flash mentoring, I still love that, absolutely love it. And I find myself engaged in that all the time. And it is such a privilege. It is such a privilege. And I never, I guess, devalue the role that has. And, you know, that the words that I say to people can most often be taken in their truest form, and to not be sort of, I guess, disregarding of the fact that, you know, that will be taken to heart and could be shaping a future leader, or really undermining the ability of someone to develop that confidence to be a future leader. And I say it truthfully, most people already are leaders. They just might not know it, or might not have the right mentor to help them to realise that.
Yeah, I mean, what a special response. I mean, as part of you know, back when you're at KFC, I'm sure you weren't brimming with a whole host of confidence and those types of things. It's something that certainly has to be developed over time, which I think is something that that mentees can miss a little bit. But, you know, I'm also a big prescriber to you can't be what you can't see. So having people in leadership positions out there that are willing to give back and just share a little bit of their own journey, which is what we're doing here today with the Cyber Edition mini mentoring series, I think goes a very long way. So that's the end of the formal questions. We've got one last bonus question that we ask everyone that we'll be putting into a special compilation episode at the end of the series. So take a deep breath.
Okay.
And let yourself dream for a moment. So if I was in the position to give you $1 million to invest in a startup, what problem would the startup be focused on solving?
That's such a big question. Because of course, you know me well, Tim. I'm an ideas person. I'm instantly thinking of at least 20 ideas right now. But if I could choose only one, do you know, I actually think at the end of the day, it would be focused on culture. I actually think that, you know, we haven't yet been able to place a financial value on how to really develop diversity of culture, diversity of thinking, diversity of ethnicity, diversity of gender, and actually really cut through on that. You know, a startup around that would be focused on, I think, modelling what great looks like as an organisation. We've got all of these kinds of you know, awards, and I don't sort of want to devalue things like male champions of change and all of those kinds of things. But for a lot of smaller organisations, those kind of initiatives work quite well to some extent. You know, it depends on which side of the measurement fence you're sitting on, but they tend to work a lot better in larger organisations. For smaller organisations that don't have the resource to be able to understand how to put the right effort in the right places to build team, to build culture, to build success through partnerships and suppliers and customers around that culture of diversity, it's really hard to see what good looks like. You know, being in the startup community, so many people say that they want to be able to show diversity and come up against all sorts of challenges in being able to do that effectively. I'd love to see us use the current generation. You know, I'm 43 years old. I'd like to think that I've still got many years ahead of me of generating lots of different ideas, but seeing other people flourish in an environment where there is true diversity, you know, that's just so both aspirational and inspirational, because I know that we can't ever unplug. We all know we will never be able to unplug from this cyber physical world that we're in. And so what do we want that future to look like? If we want it to be diverse and challenging and interesting and rewarding, and that to be a communal kind of achievement as well as an individual achievement, we've got to start really demonstrating what that looks like. Not just show pictures, not just show a case study of an example where a company did it for a moment in time, but actually live and breathe it and really demonstrate the sort of benefits that come from that, both in a financial sense but a community sense as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great one, and you know, showcasing culture and the leadership of that. You know, it's hard to build a plane mid-flight, but if you're able to actually have some reference points and be able to measure yourself and those types of things against what either industry or peers think is good, I think is great, particularly whether we're talking about post-COVID or parallel COVID. As it continues going on, culture is just going to be king as part of it. And if organisations aren't focused on that, then people are going to, find themselves in a lot of trouble from an organisation and people and culture perspective. So a very worthy cause, I think.
Well, yes, and it was said to me yesterday that, of course, like this, we work with so many different kinds of experts at AustCyber, and a colleague said to me that, you know, we really need to remember that the true downside of what's happening with the pandemic, of course, is that we're not going to see the full effects from a mental health perspective of this for at least another 12 to 18 months. So we're all doing it pretty tough at the moment from a mental health perspective, but actually it's really not going to start to expose itself for another at least year. And most of that's actually going to expose itself in the first instance through the workplace. So it's even more incentive for us to really be thinking through how we try to deal with the physicality of not being able to be together like we used to be able to do, but also at the same time be able to develop different ways of knowing what trust is when you're having most of these relationships through a Zoom.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we're over time, so thanks so much for spending the hour with us, Michelle. It was fantastic to have you on the show.
Thanks so much again, Tim. And this is such a great initiative. I love OK RDY. We want to see you shine even more.
Thank you very much. All right. Thanks again, Michelle. We'll look forward to seeing you over Zoom sometime soon.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks. Bye.